Alex Madonna, pays the taxes on it. But Bill has been living here. He was born here, and he is our host today. And even Alex Madonna calls this Froom Ranch because it's been Froom Ranch for many years. And Bill has suggested that the best thing for us to do is all sit down and eat and enjoy our lunches, and then he's willing to take you up on the hill and show you the old house and the barn. And this is Bill Froom right here, our host. And again, I say the Los Osos group of historical, Los Osos historical group, which we call La Cañada de Los Osos historical group, welcomes you to our ranch tour and picnic. And we hope that you have a good time today, and that you might like to see some of the things that Joan has done there. Joan Sullivan is the lady who helps us with the newsletter and has written so many stories and interesting stories about this place. So we hope you have a good time and visit, and we will all gather our lunches now, and let's go ahead and eat. But I'm going to introduce you first to Bill. Let's say hello to everybody.
Hi, Bill.
The last survivor came here and from Ireland, 45 years old. He was single. He wanted this ranch right through here. It was 305 acres, so Mr. Foreman, he owned all this, so he sold it to him. And so he had the dairy, just like every other dairy, and he had to have the equipment, which is 142 years ago, and the equipment is still here, and I want to show it to you people afterwards. And you had to have a churn, a butter break, and butter boxers, butter molds, paddles, and they're all up there, and they're made out of wood. There ain't no slivers in them. You can't get a sliver on them. When this poly class came here in the farm management class, they came from all the states in the Union, some of them foreign countries. And I asked them, do you ever get a different name for this? We call it a stick. That's an odd name for something. But nobody had a different name, so we're still calling it a stick. And that was to work the butter on the butter baker. And, I might forget a few things, but anyhow, this fellow came here single, but his luck changed. He met a lady that owned 3 ranches and a bank full of money. So what do you think? He married her. And so right away they wanted to increase the holding, so they bought the ranch below down there, and it was 100 acres. It was a home site. It was back in the canyon, and then they put them there to break, for the windbreak and make sure there was ample water. And that's a spring. It's a low end of a hill. Most springs are up high. This is down the bottom. If it had been higher, I imagine they'd have brought it over here into tanks and probably used it. But it's the best spring on the ranch now. So they had this barn you see over here in this chicken house, and they had an old house and it was dilapidated, so they said they tore it down, and they moved that barn intact. Most of the time they take them down and then reassemble them when they get them there. But this one they brought it just like it is, and the chicken house, because the chicken house is small, and they had to go across the creek. And I don't know if they built it before 1900. I don't know if they built a trestle or they dug the banks down. I think they dug the banks down. It took them about 2 weeks to move that barn there. I'll tell you a little bit about the barn. I'd call it a family barn. It had a loft in it, and they stored hay in there. And then on the south side, they had stalls for 4 horses. Where they put them. Underneath there, they had a pickup there that kept the buggies and wagons. On this side, they kept the farming tools. Of course, the old chicken house, you don't see one like that anymore. Young Madonna started his business here, and his dad was with him. He said, what do you put in this building? I said, that's a chicken house. He said, what do you put in there? I said, chicken. I finally relented a little bit. He owned it. I said, tell you what, if you want to take it down, you take care of the chickens. So you see them barns. So then they wanted to increase their holdings more, this lady with all the money, and so they bought the next piece from Mr. Foreman, and it had no buildings on it. It was 100 acres, so they got 505 acres in the ranch now. And then they ranched about 20 years, and Mr. Nelson got sick, and they wanted to lease it. That was 1870. And my dad was working for Mr. Foreman. He was about 17 years old, and he was working, and Mr. Foreman wanted him to take over the lease. And my dad walked to town, I guess, once a week, and he met a friend there who was a cook in a restaurant, so they talked about taking over this lease. But both of them decided we don't know nothing about farming. We'd probably lose money, but they said, well, we'll eat good, because he was a cook. And so when it comes to take the lease, they usually come out at the end of October about. The cook didn't have no money because he lived in town. He spent all his money, and my dad had to take the lease by himself. The lease was $1,500, and that included a year's rent, and then 50 head of cows and a herd bull, and 20 two-year-old heifers and yearling heifers, and 4 horses, harness, all the dairy equipment, and 3 barns full of mouths full of hay. And my dad took it over. Well, the Nelsons lived in the old ramshackle house that was here, and my dad had to have a place to live, so he lived in one of the rooms in the old dairy. He noticed they weren't using that, so he set up a bachelor's pad there. He had his stove and his table and his bed, and he stayed 31 years in that building without any telephone or any electric of any kind. And he had a hired man, of course, had a door in the thing, and they built a kind of an L in the corner there. It only went up 8 feet high. The building was 12, and that's where the hired man stayed. It was just big enough for his bed and his nightstand and his bunk, whatever, in the back. And the different hired men stayed there. They'd eat with my dad in his little pad, and then they'd go in there to go to bed by 8 o'clock. And there were only single balls with knot holes in them, so I imagine it got kind of cold in the winter. But they didn't know any better. That was it. So my dad, back 31 years, I said there, and then he got married. He was 48 years old. He should have known better. Anyhow, him and some of his neighbor friends built this little building you see there on the end here. And that's where I was born. 6 of us was born in that, and the youngest brother was born. So the old lady, Mr. Nelson died, and the old lady was running. The old lady Nelson, I shouldn't say that. But a neighbor lady told me when she was 15 years old, she'd come up and help harness up the old white horse into a buggy, and they'd go up to collect the rent from them ranches up there at Cambria. But then when the young lady got older and married, then the old lady just, some of the help would help her harness the horse, and they'd drive into the stable and leave the horse, and she got on the stage and drove to Cambria. And they tell the story, she collected all the money, and she wore her most tattered dresses, and some of them are green from age already, and she was on this bus coming back, and the bandit, Joaquin Marietta, he happened to be on the stage, and he was eyeing the old lady all the way down, and felt feeling sorry for her. And so he got off at Morrow when they stopped, so he gave the old lady $1. He figured she could sure use it. And she had her whole purse full of money from the rent, and he didn't know that. They tell the story whether that's true or not. I wanted to start out, I was born here and buried here 50 years, and Donna, who owns the ranch now, wanted me to stay here. And Phyllis feels like I could tell some history about the property. Well, I'm going to go back to about 1850, and I was going to tell you the guy bought it from the Indians, but he didn't. Another guy owned it. So this fellow's name was Foreman. He owned all these ranches through here, and this guy come from Ireland. His name was Ledrick Nelson, good old Irish name, Ledrick. And he was like all them men in Ireland. They never married till after they were 40 years old. And he was 45 when he got here, and he wanted this piece of land right through here. And so Mr. Foreman was a good-hearted man. He said, sure. So he sold it to him from the road back as far as it goes. And the last corner back there, there's a deposit of high-grade chrome ore. Really, probably the only high-grade ore in the United States. And it's been worked 3 different times. In 1890, they had Chinese labor that dug the tunnels up there in the hill. And in the courthouse, this place is listed as Mine Hill. And then the next, they dug this, but chrome is not like, don't run in veins, just like a shotgun shot against a mountain, and they'd follow the lead in and they'd run out of chrome, so they'd dig another tunnel. And they had 9, I think the last one, you wouldn't think there'd be water up there, but the water run them out of the tunnel. So in 15, P.H. Red, I don't know if anybody ever heard of him, he was a postmaster one time, and he was also a real estate man and a preacher, and then he delved in minerals. So he had the lease here, and they had what they call a sluice trough, and they run the water from this mine and had the water in down the sluice, and the guys would shovel the chrome in as they went by. But when they got down so deep into adobe and clay, they couldn't handle it, and so that wasn't successful. And then in 41, another group come in here, and they had bulldozers like they have, and they just, when I was up there, I told them, look out, their mines are there. They thought I was nuts, because they'd caved in kind of on the front, and the brush grew up on them, and they bulldozed all them out now, and nothing but a mess up there. And they had the nicest setup you ever saw with concentrating tables working like that. It would fall off the end, and the way the camera had some pictures, and it was under a building. They had a diesel engine running a electric plant, and then everything went by electric up there. Well, a Turk that went to Poly, he was going to be hired to run it, because when he went back to Turkey, they got a lot of ore there. He'd know how to do it. Well, he only worked there one night, and they couldn't handle the adobe and clay with the chrome machine, so they quit and moved over back to the camp where they got a low-grade ore. What little they sold out of this, and brought $160 a ton during the war, and that over there back at the camp brought about $25 a ton. Then they wanted to work a deal after these guys left where they'd haul this and mix it in with that so they'd rise the test. And they sent it to Grants Pass, Oregon for test. And you see Gondola car on the SP with sugar beets in there piled clear up over the thing. That's a 40-ton car. And for this chrome, they had a red line about 8 inches from the bottom. And that's 40 tons. You don't go no higher than that. That's how heavy this stuff is. And we've got some over here on the shelf, and I want you people to look at it and take some of it even, because I got to get rid of it sometime. But to tell the story a little bit, them corrals were built in 1953, and that's 40 years old. They don't last that long. They were built for old dairy cows to ship. You know, you had to kind of prod them to get them through a gate. And now they got Bramers, and they don't go through a gate. They just jump on top of the fence and smash it down. So there's hardly any corral left. But the cowboy is thinking of building them out of pipe. And he says to me, well, what are you going to do with them rocks you got on the shelf there? I said, them are not rocks. That's high-grade ore. I picked them up at different places around the ranch. So I'm telling you this because someday I'm going to have to get it off there. And so if you people want any samples, you just look at them and pick them up. One time, I think Joan remembers the group coming on. I told the guy it was high-grade ore. I don't think he took my word for it. Next time he come, he had one of them things on that they in the jewelry store where they look through diamonds. And he was looking through the chrome. He said, yeah, you're right, it is high grade. So I'm just telling you this to see that old house up there. That was the kitchen. And the roof leaked. Of course, it ruined the floor. So they tore everything out. You see it in the pile back there. And they started building it. And people asked me what's going on. I said, that's going to be a kitchen. And they're working on it. They've been working on it for 20 years. and this is a porch on this side. It was a 4-foot porch, and the wind got, and one of the beside men was here. He said, if it was up to me, I'd get a bulldozer and I'd push everything off the hill there and I'd start over. He don't want a new home up there. He wanted to restore the old dairy, and that's why he did. And they tore down that porch 3 times, and the 4th time it's there, and the carpenter quit. He said, he don't like nothing I do. So I'm not gonna take you out to see it. And in the early days, when you had a new child in the family, they built another room on it, But they never built them the floor the same height. It'd be 8 inches too high or 8 inches too low. And they only had a candle to walk around there. So they must have drank good whiskey because they never fell down. At least they blamed it on the whiskey. So this building was fastened to the old house, and the old house, my dad just demolished it. And that was a pretty well done building. So they moved it, I can remember moving around, setting it up there, and we used it as a bunkhouse just for beds in it, and all this by the nice stuff there. You can see, and the door was on this side because it was fastened to the house, and the wind would blow into it. The carpenter closed this and made it on the end there. Different people come here, and the first thing they say, well, what's this building for? So I tell them what it was for.
When was this house built, that's here, Bill?
Yeah, this house was built in 1950. The old fella laying in bed, and he kept his chain right inside the bed, and he gave it to him. He threw it down, all was good. He went back to the kitchen, and he heard a little tapping in there. He didn't know what it was. He went back in there, and the old guy couldn't hardly talk. He got his ear right down close to see what was trouble. We had to hold that chain. He come up, let him have it right over their head. When he came up to my dad, he said, to my dad, the blood was running all over, and he asked me what happened. That's all he said. If you want to give him whiskey, you give it to him yourself. So when my dad came down, he found out what happened. Anyhow, the old lady, I had help put in the swamp hay, and they put it in the barn too green and begin to ferment. They could smell it, it was burning. And they said they dug holes in it, put rock salt in it to kind of put out the fire. They didn't do it. They got out to the air up the barn. That barn was a horse barn. It was about twice the size because it had room for about 14 horses. Only had room for 8. And the sparks grew from there over to the cow barn. That burned up, and then the sparks grew on down to a haystack they had, and that burned up. And the guys, I remember a little guy about 2 years old, and the neighbors were all here, and they were running out of the barn, packing harness and throwing it out. And some of them would take burlap sacks and put it in the horse trough, we call it, and get them wet, and they'd throw them up on the roof, and the guy was on the roof of the old dairy, and he was putting them there to keep the spark. Otherwise, we would have burned up the old dairy, too. So Mrs. Nelson was still living, so she was going to rebuild the barns. And I can remember they'd bring out the lumber, and they all brought it to the foot of the hill, and it looked like a lumber yard there. They had so much there. And my dad and the hired help would load it on the wagon, whatever timbers they need. And a carpenter by the name of Jim Aiken, he'd come out here with his partners and a horse and buggy, and he'd walk it down by the creek and set up a tent, and that's where he lived. And he sawed all those timbers by hand, with a hand saw. And built those 2 barns and a granary, which I'll show you. And the granary, that's in 1913. And the granary is mouse-proof. There's never been a mouse in it. Like I said, Miss Polly class notified they were coming. I always went up and checked it to make sure there was no mice in it. And that's the change in my speech. And so, then the old lady died. And she made a will, which is called a chain will. One makes a hoping for the other. And it said in the will she had no living relatives. And a lot of them thought my mother from Northern Ireland, they must have been some relation, but she gave all the ranches to renters, whoever was on them. I think they're doing that issue, probably down at the Cañada. They were on the ranches, they got them 2 ranches, and one is still a very my uncle got, because he was on it there, and my mother and dad got this place. So then Sweeney built this house here in 15, 2 years after he got it. They said that, like happens when you die, your relatives come out of the woodwork. And that's what they did. They didn't want the ranches, they wanted their money. So one of them was telling about it. He said, I spent all the money I had trying to get some of it. I never got it, so I quit. And that's what they did. They say she gave the money she had left to some church in St. Louis. And the ranches all through that. That's about the end of that.
Well, how did your father happen to be here? Where did he come from, and why did he come here?
My dad came from eastern Canada. And you didn't hitchhike in them days. You worked your way out. It took him 4 years, and he worked for Mr. Foreman, was the next door neighbor there. And he was the one that insisted on my dad taking over the lease, and that's how come he was here. And then he had met my mother when she came from Ireland. He met her somewhere. They had a lot of parties in the days, like the Irish Shields and stuff like that. And that's where he met my mother. And the wedding certificate used to still be here. I don't know where it is now. But my mother was over 18 and my dad was 48. They ended up raising 7 kids in the house, 6 of them out of that house and 1 down here. So now, this is a nice turnout. I want to take half of you. I wanted to show you that whole equipment which is still up there.
So when you get another job that they like, you can get this has to be a rocket.
But you can't do that today. You can't get along with Charlie. All right, Mike. Showing us away. I think they This is, when everybody's in here, I want to
Some of these properties that came over from that.
You can see this room is a lean-to even. When they put a roof on a building in those days, it didn't leak like today. I wanted to talk to you here because this is the room where my dad bashed in for 31 years. It looks a little different now, but it had a wall across here, good redwood, 12-inch, and I took them to use them. They had a drawer here where they hired man. I'll show you where he bumped. But my dad bumped in this part of it here for 31 years. And then you can see it's just a lean-to. And it didn't have a shingle roof on it, and it didn't leak. Dad might have moved out. I'm out of here. Although my dad bumped in that part of the room, and he had to come in here to wash it, all the work, there's the towel right there.
The original.
I was married here, they tore everything off again, and I had to put them all back for you folks. Madonna had all this plywood where he made bridges and stuff. They had to bring it over to the ground out here further on the floor. That's why it's a plywood floor. But this had a cement wall around here, like all the way around. And you probably didn't notice that boiler on the outside there. Inside here, and this brick pile up here, and the only thing left is... The trouble is today we all know too much. So now, this was just another room where I could come down here in the dark. Your dairy had to be 100 feet from your barn. I could come down in the dark and go up my steps and pour my milk in there. I didn't need no light. I knew exactly where it was. I opened this up to let more light in. We're not going to go out there and go and got carpet before you can hold this up. They put the milk in pans in them days. This thing had shelving all the way around like a hat. You've been in the dance hall where they had a place where you coat the hat and everything. Well, that's what this was. These pans would hold 3 gallons of milk, and they'd fill them up and put them on them shelves. And then they even had a stove in here because they tore everything out. And they'd keep this warm in here so the cream would rise to the top of the pan. And then they'd take it here, and then they'd knock the cream off into the cream can and pour the skim milk down to this, and there's a funnel on it, and it went down to the hogs, to a vat where the hogs were. And they said they raised better hogs in them days, and I think they did because there was quite a lot of cream went down there. And this is where they separated the cream from the milk. And then they took the cream in a can like that, it held 8 gallons, and they keep it till it was sour, and they churned sour cream in them days. One guy asked me, Mr. Mark Patton up at the museum, he said, wouldn't that butter be rancid? I said, when it got to San Francisco. I said it was rancid before it left. But you had nothing to compare it with. So we get butter out of sweet cream now, and you could compare the two of them. You wouldn't eat this other. But that was butter, and everybody ate it. It was rancid, but everybody ate it. So then, this was what you call the butter room. It had all this, you see, it was all painted and nice shape. It even had a ceiling in it, but them young carpenter here up there, that had to go. Out with the ceiling, had a terracotta pipe down here for the stove. That had to go. There was a lot of antiques in here, and they threw them down the hills and broke them all up. And here, You asked me what this thing is. This is a corn shell. My dad came from the east, you know, and this side down here, and they grow a lot of corn in Iowa. And so when he died out here, he had to grow corn. Well, we had to shell it. So this thing, you push the ears through it, you turn it, and shell it. And they got one up in the museum, but it's in better shape than this. Otherwise, I had to give him this one. This one's been used, I don't think there's had been. So this is all plywood floor because Madonna had a lot of it there. But the floor was pretty warm. With a car like this, you couldn't get through the floor. We got a nice floor in it. Now I want to show you the old turns and stuff. I put that there. The other I want to show you. This is 143 years old. Torn in, folks. I opened this door to let more light in so you can see it. This was the butter room where they made the butter and everything. They even had a curtain on that window they put down. And the butter just stayed here in a cool room. It stayed good on it. We didn't have refrigeration. This is the turn right here. This was made in 1850, 51. And you can see how it was put together. There's hardly no nails in it. And a turn, this is a place that took out the buttermilk. That is pretty. That's the first thing you took out. You have it down like that, and you take the buttermilk out and keep it. Now they put ingredients in sweet cream in order to churn it, and they can't drink the buttermilk. They have to manufacture it afterwards. I'll show you. One time a Negro student was here, while I was talking about this, he opened this thing up and he let loose of it and hit the bar. I said, not to embarrass him, I said, that's the way you open it, but not so loud. This is where they poured in the cream. My dad would churn 8 gallons a day when he churned it, and he had to slop back and forth as he churned went around. And it was run by a horsepower. On the way out, I'll show you a horsepower still here. It's all iron. Most people took them all iron things and sold them for scrap iron. And these, every dairy I think had one of these, and one of these. But they threw them out in the weather and they went to the deal. They needed the space and they just threw them out of the weather. I got a canvas that's in the back that I pull over the top of it. You folks ain't here. And I got this tarp here. And you'd be surprised the dust that gets on it.
What did they do with this?
Here's pallets there, 142 years. And they take this butter out, as I remember my dad did, and put it onto this thing. So you got it all out, and then these were butter molds. This is what we call the stick. Would you call this a stick? I don't think so. But anyhow, you had your butter on there and you worked it back and forth and you patted it down and all the moisture was in it ran out. That's why it's downhill. And this is called a butter break. And I'd ask the students, you got a different name for this? And they were stick. But in all those 18 years, none of them students had a different name. This was it. This is called the butter break. And then they take these molds and make this butter and then put it into that box that's in the back of him over there, butter box. And all of this was made and everything in 1850, 142. No slivers. You see, what kind of wood is this that don't have no slivers? No slivers in this. Would it be maple? Somebody ought to have an answer there.
Sanded by this time.
Yeah, and that's how they worked it. See, I was called a butter break. It worked from one side to the other. You bring it down, and then you salted it. You put the salt in evenly so it wouldn't be in one place. You worked it with a stick here. That's what I wanted to show you today. And it's a little rough here because of the salt. The churn didn't get no salt. This got the salt, so you left the wood a little rough. Not too bad. This was built by a millman in St. Louis. They didn't have lag screws in them days. There's no nails in it. They take a bolt and put through, and they could tell how long it was, and they bore a hole up and put a washer in it. Then wind the bolt in and that's what holds it together. So they had no lag screws.
So how long was this used? I mean, when was the last time this was used?
Well, I was born in 10, so it had to be about 15. And to run that churn, that's where I was. And the rod run under here and had a chain on it, and that'd run the churn. That's how it went. But my daddy made just enough for the family to keep it there in the box. The sisters run out of butter and he'd come up and get a bowl. Take it down. And then they had the buttermilk there in a crock. The crock was down here with whole buttermilk, and it'd be thick as it could be, and just stir it up good, and boy, it was quenching. And my sister would take some down and making biscuits or sandwiches or something like that. But this old, to tell the story, this old cook, he'd come out here on Sunday, and we'd go for a picnic down to Abilene or something, and we wouldn't be here, so he'd just lay around here to sleep, but we'd know he'd be gone when he got back. But we knew he was here because the buttermilk crock was empty. He drank all of it. Oh, he liked buttermilk. He was going to be a partner of my dad's, but he didn't have the money, so but he was a good friend. So that's why it's here. I live here. I think every day in the valley had one of these. Sure and all. Because they had to have one to sell the product. They all had to have it. When Madonna first bought it, I showed it to him. The carpenter happened to be here. Madonna says, "Oh, we've got a room at the end so everybody can see this." And the carpenter says, "That would be the day." They hadn't had that. But that's what you did. Should be up there so everybody can see it. I used to love it to Polly, when they had Polly Royal, they'd have it there in the dairy in comparison with their new stuff. Nobody looked at the new stuff, they were all looking at that old wooden stuff that was there. one guy, I think he was a son or two from Pigeon Beach, and he wanted to have his picture taken there. So he was took. He had never seen any of his folks.
Look at how nice they made the table. I mean, it even has turned legs on it like a piece of furniture.
Yeah, they're even fancy legs too. And I was telling them, I think you heard me, they didn't have lag screws, they just run bolts through and then tighten them up, and that's what holds this together. There's no nails, no lag.
That's heavy. Did they turn it? Did they turn that churn
Yes.
by hand?
Look at this thing. Might have been horsepower.
It was horsepower, she said. There's a gear on the far side there. You see in there, you see a horse out there who turns something, turns the shaft. Not a chain.
I was going to say,
I know, I just
It did 8 gallons of wax.
pulled it from behind the chair here. IG, do that thing.
that makes me a little
It
nervous.
looks like a brand new
Well, race, that's why.
the old compass
With
kettle.
that, or you can tell.
Preserved. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a brand new?
No, it's smooth.
Check it out. I have branding iron.
But I like to get over here, let my cows in, out of the weather, and you have to worry about them. You learn how to get around in here, because they got so much room. This is Pennsylvania, right? It's California on this side, 20 on this side, this is Madonna junk.
You're too.
You see all the cans of paint, supposed to paint the stripe on the highway yellow. You got the paint, you never paint the stripe. So the carpenter, when he painted this yellow, he wouldn't use none of that. If he diluted, he wouldn't use it. He had a fire paint. This floor, what you call a V-type gutter. You notice, you can't all see on that side. The original gutters were like that. And you bring in a fresh heifer, she's afraid of that gutter, and when she jumps across it, people right out, she falls down. This way, I saw a barn of a Cañada one time, and I told the guy to put the in for me. When I wanted to, you know what I was talking about. So I got in his car and went up to Cañada to church, and then he come down and built this V-type gutter. kind of on the front. It's easy to clean, it's easy for the cattle to walk up on it. I think the other side in for $500, I put this side in, clean wall, for $750. The guy bought a cement mixer and the gravel, and I helped him do it, and we done it by hand.
On that stuff down there, those stones, they look like some of the stuff left from the first ranch.
That's right. That's right. He came in and did it, he did. I had different ones. I had Joan Sullivan, if you remember that. Maybe we could use it in a drum, in artwork. Yes. We'll go by there and we'll look at it.
Joan, too.
Little statues and just everything.
I'll get out of the way here.
Oh,
And the other Barney's got stuff over there from the Hirsch. They've never used, but it's there. And all this stuff is brought here.
Sounds like Kristen's in it.
So, at last, when I didn't milk so many cows, I just let them come by here. I didn't milk them. He tore down a school in town, and the hardwood farm was any good, so he brought it out here. He never used it yet.
That's what you always want.
And
When did Madonna get into San Luis?
did what?
When did he actually move to San Luis?
He lived out on the shore when he was a kid. His dad died in 1918. Then he went down here to the Bassett brothers, which is his mother's brothers, and he went to school down there. Then they had a big guy at a cost in the mission. He lived there with his cousin and sister, so I'm not sure he's all that down in the They all moved some property upstairs, past the end, but it wasn't developed, and she wouldn't take it. She took the money instead. This was some of the benches I had in the old dairy where I could walk up and pull my milk and my tap in my tap. Here's where it sat on. They were using it to saw. They almost sawed the thing in two.
Yeah, they weren't real precise, were they?
One day I come up here and the guy had some of these timbers and he had them held up with his knee and he had an electric saw and he was just a saw. Hey, what happened to the guy who did it yesterday? He said, oh, he sawed his knee. I said, that's what you're going to do. I said, I got some saw horses, I'm going to haul them up here. And he said, oh, no, I wouldn't do it. But I brought him up. I hate to see him sawing a timber on his knee. Use an electric saw. So I just wanted to show you kind of what the old floor was like. It was all wood. The inspectors that give me the yellow, they didn't think they couldn't have to sue them and all that stuff. So I had this floor put in here. And then I had it on the other side. That's 4 feet off the ground, so I never have to build a retaining wall and fill it in. So this was the electric plant right here. Along there down. Deal about magnetic. They were on the electric. This stuff